Hannah and Jack leaned against the railing of their boat, the Azure Dream, watching the horizon blend seamlessly with the vast expanse of the ocean. Their fingers were intertwined, the golden bands on their left hands glinting under the afternoon sun. These rings were a testament to their recent vows, a promise of forever that neither ever thought they'd find. Imagine, a week away from everything, just you and me, Hannah whispered, her head resting on Jack's shoulder. Jack smiled, pressing a kiss on her forehead. Away from the hustle, the deadlines, the chaos, it's just what we needed. The gentle waves cradled their boat, the soft hum of the breeze and the distant call of seagulls their only company. It felt like paradise. As the sun began its descent, casting hues of gold and amber across the waters, Jack navigated the boat towards deeper waters. He loved the thrill of the unknown, the challenge of conquering new territories. But that night, adventure took a dark turn. Underneath the velvety blanket of stars, Hannah was preparing a light dinner in the cabin when a sudden jolt threw her off balance. The sound of splintering wood echoed ominously, followed by the icy grip of panic as water began seeping in. "Jack!" she screamed, rushing on deck, only to find him grappling with the wheel, his face pale. "We hit something!" he shouted over the wind that had suddenly picked up. The couple scrambled to gather essentials, their dreams sinking along with the Azure Dream into the abyss below. The lifeboat, fortunately, remained intact. They launched it desperately, rowing away from the wreckage, their hopes pinned on the silhouette of an island that seemed to appear out of nowhere on the horizon. As they approached, the island's dark, dense forest became visible, and an uneasy feeling settled in Hannah's heart. "It wasn't on the map," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. Jack gripped the oars tighter, determination set on his face. "We'll signal for help in the morning," he assured her. "For now, we need to find shelter and stay safe." But even as they set foot on the island, an eerie silence enveloped them, punctuated only by the soft, indistinct whispers that seemed to float on the wind. The grey sand crunched under their feet as Hannah and Jack stepped onto the shore. The absence of the usual coastal sounds, no chirping birds, no rustling leaves, made their arrival feel even more alien. All they heard was the soft murmur of whispers that seemed to come from all directions yet nowhere at all. "We need to find fresh water and maybe some fruits or something to eat," Jack said, trying to maintain an air of practicality. His eyes, however, darted around nervously, trying to locate the source of the whispers. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the denser canopy blocked most of the sunlight, plunging the surroundings into an eerie half-light. The tall, gnarled trees looked ancient, their bark rough and contorted. And as they walked further, Hannah stopped abruptly, pulling Jack's arm. "Look at this," she whispered, pointing to a tree. The bark had formed what looked like a twisted, anguished face, eyes shut tight as if in pain. As they continued, they realized it wasn't just one tree. Every tree seemed to have a face, some in silent screams, others in visible agony or sorrow. It was as if the very souls of the island were trapped within them. Trying to shake off the growing dread, they stumbled upon a small freshwater stream. They eagerly drank, the cool water alleviating some of their fear and fatigue. Nearby, they found a bush bearing dark blue berries. After making sure they weren't poisonous, they ate their fill. As dusk approached, Jack suggested they make a temporary shelter. Using large leaves and some vines, they crafted a makeshift tent. They gathered dry wood and started a fire, its flickering light casting dancing shadows that seemed to take on a life of their own. Sitting close together, they tried to keep their spirits up. "We'll signal for help at first light," Jack reassured Hannah, pulling her close. "We'll get off this island." But as the night deepened, the whispers grew louder and more insistent. They weren't just lamentations anymore. Some sounded like taunts, while others seemed to be pleading. "We should have stayed in the boat," Hannah murmured, her voice quivering. Jack wrapped his arms around her, but even he couldn't hide the unease in his eyes. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig felt like a threat. They clung to each other, praying for dawn and a way out of this nightmare. Morning's first light was a welcome sight for the couple, although the trees and their tormenting faces looked even more ghastly in the clear day. Hannah and Jack decided that if they were going to signal for help, they needed a vantage point. The tall hill in the centre of the island seemed the obvious choice. The trek was harder than they anticipated. The underbrush was thick, and the ground seemed to shift under their feet, as if the very island was attempting to thwart their progress. Vines appeared to reach out, trying to entangle them, and more than once they had to backtrack when a path led to a thicket of thorns or an impassable ravine. The whispers grew more intense and coherent the higher they climbed. "Turn back," they seemed to implore. "Leave while you still can." Pushing forward, they finally reached the summit. But the sight that greeted them was more horrifying than anything they had imagined. Below, in a vast clearing, lay a massive pit. The pit was filled with corroded remnants of ships, shattered airplane fragments, and skeletal remains, all testament to countless unsuccessful journeys to the island. On the periphery of the pit stood grotesque stone statues, a melding of human and beast, each one more terrifying than the next. Their stone eyes seemed to glint with an inner light, and for a moment, Hannah could have sworn she saw one twitch. Jack, pulling out the binoculars he'd managed to save from their wrecked boat, scanned the horizon for any sign of a passing ship, but his gaze kept returning to the statues. "Hannah," he whispered, "those aren't just statues. Look at the ground around them." Hannah squinted and realized that at the base of each statue were fresh offerings, fruits, fish, and in some cases, what looked disturbingly like human bones. "We're not alone," she murmured, her voice quaking with fear. As they debated their next move, the statues began to shift and come alive, their stone exteriors cracking and falling away to reveal the horrific creatures beneath. They were the guardians of the island, tasked with ensuring that no one who came to the island ever left. The whispers turned into a cacophony of screams and taunts. The ground trembled as the creatures began their slow ascent towards Hannah and Jack. In a desperate bid for survival, Jack fired the flare gun they'd brought with them. The brilliant red light shot up into the sky, illuminating the entire island. As they waited with bated breath, the flare's glow drew the attention of a nearby ship. But would it arrive in time to save them from the island's ancient guardians? The flare's bright tail seemed to hang in the sky forever, its crimson hue contrasting sharply against the darkening canvas of the island. The guardians, momentarily stunned by the flare's brilliance, hesitated in their approach. This brief reprieve gave Hannah and Jack the time they needed. "We need to get off this summit," Jack gasped, pulling Hannah by the hand. They sprinted down the hill, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the now awakening stone creatures. But the descent was treacherous. The very earth seemed to conspire against them, shifting and causing them to stumble. Hannah's foot got caught in a vine, and she tumbled, dragging Jack down with her. As they struggled to free themselves, the whispers returned, this time sounding triumphant and mocking. But amidst the cacophony, a new sound pierced the air, a distant thrumming, the sound of helicopter blades. The flare had been spotted. Emboldened, Jack managed to free Hannah, and they continued their frenzied descent. But the guardians were relentless. Though made of stone and seemingly heavy, they moved with surprising speed and agility. Every time Hannah and Jack dared to glance back, the guardians were alarmingly closer. Suddenly, ahead of them, the trees began to thin out, revealing the beach and the sea beyond. And there, hovering above the water, was a rescue helicopter, its searchlight sweeping the island. But between them and salvation lay the most fearsome of the guardians, a colossal creature, half man, half beast, its eyes glowing malevolently. It stepped forward, blocking their path to the beach. Jack, in a desperate move, rummaged in his backpack and pulled out a mirror he'd kept for signalling. Using the dying light of the day, he reflected the sun's rays into the guardian's eyes, momentarily blinding it. Seizing the opportunity, Hannah and Jack darted around the creature, making a final sprint for the beach. The helicopter descended lower, ropes dropping from its side. As the couple clambered aboard, the guardians halted at the edge of the forest. their eerie eyes watching intently but making no move to approach the water. It was as if some ancient pact or magic held them back. The helicopter ascended, leaving the cursed island behind. Hannah and Jack, exhausted but alive, clung to each other, their hearts pounding not just from fear, but also from the overwhelming relief of their escape. Once safely aboard the rescue ship, Hannah and Jack were immediately taken to the infirmary. Their cuts and bruises were tended to, warm blankets wrapped around their shivering forms, and hot drinks pressed into their hands. The ship's crew regarded them with a mixture of pity and awe. Captain Ramirez, a grizzled old sailor with deep-set eyes, came to see them. His gaze lingered on Hannah's bandaged arm and Jack's bruised face before finally settling into a chair opposite them. "You were on that island," he began, more a statement than a question. Hannah nodded, her voice shaky. "Yes, we got shipwrecked. But how did you find us?" "One of our lookouts spotted the flare," Captain Ramirez explained. "It's not the first time we've seen distress signals coming from that place, but you're among the very few who've made it off alive." Jack's eyes widened. "You know about the island?" The captain sighed deeply, the weight of many years heavy in his exhale. "We call it the Island of Lost Souls. Sailors have been avoiding it for centuries. Those who venture too close either never return or are found floating adrift, their minds shattered." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The island is cursed. Legends say it was once inhabited by a tribe who worshipped ancient deities, entities older than time itself. As a sacrifice, they would offer the souls of shipwrecked sailors to these entities, turning them into the stone guardians you saw." Hannah shuddered. The trees, with faces, they looked like they were in agony. Captain Ramirez nodded. "They are the trapped souls of the island, forever bound to the land, and the whispers are their eternal lamentations." The room fell silent, each person lost in their thoughts. The ship's engine hummed steadily in the background, a reminder that they were moving further away from the cursed island. After what felt like an eternity, Jack finally spoke. "Thank you for saving us. We would have been lost without you." The captain smiled, albeit sadly. "Just promise me one thing. Never go back to that place. Some horrors are best left undisturbed." As the ship sailed into the night, the island of whispers faded into the distance, its dark secrets hidden once more by the vast expanse of the ocean. Months had passed since their harrowing escape from the island of lost souls. Hannah and Jack, now back in the hustle and bustle of city life, tried to pick up the threads of their lives. But the nightmares and memories of the island refused to fade. Hannah had taken to painting as a form of therapy. Her studio walls were lined with canvases depicting the gnarled trees with haunting faces, the ominous stone guardians, and the endless expanse of the cursed island. She painted not just from memory but from the depths of her soul, trying to exorcise the demons of that place. One evening, as Jack entered the studio with 2 cups of tea, he froze. In front of him was a new painting, but it was unlike the others. This one depicted a serene beach scene at sunset. Gentle waves lapped the shore, and in the distance, 2 silhouettes stood hand in hand, looking out to sea. "Hannah," he whispered, "this is different." She looked up, a soft smile on her face. "I realized that while the island was a place of horror, it also strengthened our bond. In the face of unspeakable evil, our love was the beacon that guided us out. I wanted to capture that." Jack wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "We survived together, and that's what matters." As the days turned into weeks and then months, the couple began a new project. They penned down their experiences, hoping to turn them into a book, a warning to others about the island and its malevolent history. It became a bestseller, resonating with readers not just for its horror, but also for the undying human spirit it portrayed. But the past wasn't done with them. One fateful day, a letter arrived, sealed with an unfamiliar emblem. Inside was an old photograph. It depicted a group of people on a beach, their faces filled with joy and laughter. But what chilled Hannah and Jack to the bone was the backdrop. the unmistakable silhouette of the island of lost souls. On the back of the photograph, a note read, "Your story isn't unique. The island has been calling souls for centuries. But remember, not all are trapped in anguish. Some found peace." The couple exchanged uneasy glances. The island, it seemed, would forever remain an enigma, its whispers echoing not just in its haunted woods, but in the annals of time itself.